Today, Ether inches closer to the $3,000 level after reaching its year-to-date high yesterday. Digital Currency Group objects to a proposed deal between its subsidiary Genesis and the New York State Attorney General, and core DAO contributor Rich Rines explains why he thinks 2024 will be a big year for crypto. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Jordan Smith. Crypto prices in the green today. As of noon Eastern, Bitcoin held steady above $51,000. Ether increased more than 1.2%, trading close to $3,000, and Solana traded pretty flat at 104. All right, let's talk about the top stories. Digital Currency Group has doubts about a deal between its subsidiary, Genesis, and the New York State Attorney General. Back on February 8th, Genesis filed a proposal in bankruptcy court to settle the New York AG's claims that the crypto lender defrauded investors. That settlement needs to be approved by the court, but it would see the AG's office paid only after payments were made to customers. As part of the deal, Genesis agreed to stop conducting business in New York. Genesis would pay customers the value of their funds at the time of the bankruptcy filing. And if you remember, crypto prices were much lower in January 2023 when Genesis filed for bankruptcy protection. After that repayment, the remaining assets would be turned over to the AG, who would distribute that money back to unsecured creditors, meaning customers would get more money. Well, yesterday, Digital Currency Group objected to that settlement proposal in a new filing, arguing the deal would take value from lower classes of creditors and redistribute them to preferred ones. The company argued that Genesis had given away the entire residual value of its estate to the New York AG. Earlier this month, DCG also objected to an amended bankruptcy plan from Genesis, arguing it would overpay a certain class of creditors. Next, a Texas crypto company and an industry group are suing the SEC, claiming it overstepped its authority in regulating crypto. The company, called Legilex, plans to launch a crypto platform called Legit Exchange, but wants to list assets the SEC has deemed securities. Well, the company launched a lawsuit with the Crypto Freedom Alliance of Texas to challenge the SEC's jurisdiction. In the claim, the two groups say the SEC lacks legal authority to regulate most digital assets, and that commissioners themselves have said Congress hasn't granted the authority to the agency to do so. Now, one thing to note about Legilex, it's a relatively new company with no product yet. Its first post on X is only from a week ago, on February 15th, and its domain, legit.exchange, it's registered in Iceland. But the Crypto Freedom Alliance of Texas launched last year and has members from places like Andreessen Horowitz, Bain Capital's crypto unit, Blockchain Capital, and more. Now, we reached out to the SEC, Legilex, and the Crypto Freedom Alliance of Texas, but didn't hear back right away. All right, back to markets for our main story. With Bitcoin holding steady above $51,000 and Ether crossing the $3,000 mark this week for the first time since April of 2022, Crypto World's Talia Kaplan spoke with core DAO contributor Rich Rines about what's driving the recent rally, and he also weighs in on the potential impact of the upcoming Bitcoin halving event on miners.
So Bitcoin's trading above $51,800 as of around 11:30 this morning, with the cryptocurrency hitting a year-to-date high of just under $53,000. That's according to Coin metrics. Meanwhile, Ether crossed above $3,000 earlier this week for the first time since April of 2022, hitting a year-to-date high of $3,032 yesterday. Now, Bitcoin is up more than 21% so far this year, and Ether is up even more. So I'm wondering, what do you think is driving crypto prices right now? And why do you think Ether is outperforming Bitcoin so far this year? Do you think the expectation that spot Ether ETFs will likely win approval now that spot Bitcoin ETFs are trading here in the US is part of the equation?
So I do think the ETF narrative in Ethereum is what's driving the price appreciation today. And if you look at, back year, we go to, 2023, Bitcoin's trading at, 15,000, in early January. Now it's, 51.8, as you mentioned earlier. And a lot of that has been driven by this institutionalization of the asset class and that continual bid that we're seeing from, institutions all around. And there's really no signs of that slowing down. I think there's already been 5 billion plus of net inflows since these, spot ETFs first got approved, which has blown away even, the most bullish analyst expectations. There's been a transposition of that into Ethereum, I think, as kind of a forward-looking trade.
So do you think the SEC will approve spot Ether ETFs now that spot Bitcoin ETFs are live in the US? I mean, the agency is due to give decisions on those applications beginning in May, BlackRock, Invesco, ARK, and VanEck are among the firms in line for approval, as well as Grayscale, which is seeking to convert its existing Ethereum trust into an ETF. So, what do you think will happen there?
So this might be an unpopular opinion at the moment, but I actually don't think we're going to see it in April or May of this year. But I do think potentially later this year. I think the SEC is a established regulatory body that's going to want data points here, and I think we haven't seen enough in the Bitcoin spot ETF market to get enough of a go forward read there. Ethereum is a more complex asset. There's more pieces there under the hood. Plus, there's been a very different relationship between the SEC and Ethereum, I think, to put that politically over the years.
So, all 10 of the spot Bitcoin ETFs that are trading in the US are in the green, with most of them climbing around 10% since launching on January 11th. On top of that, as you mentioned, they continue to see strong inflows. So, what do you think about these numbers, and how do you think the approval of these investment vehicles impacted crypto sentiment as a whole?
So the approval of the spot ETFs were just flat out massive. One, there's just the accessibility piece where it's now the largest asset managers in the world can get access to the next best thing to spot Bitcoin for the first time. But then also Bitcoin now has the legitimacy of being an exchange traded product for the first time in a way that many thought would never be possible. I remember thinking the ETF was going to get approved in 2018, and been wrong so many times as the years have gone on. But I think this is really the next wave of crypto adoption. And I think when we think about the inflows, so many of the largest RIAs, institutional asset managers, haven't even been fully putting their sales teams to work yet. This is still early. Folks want data points. There's all the different people that haven't maybe pulled the trigger on their retirement accounts yet. So I think as we look into the halvening and some of these other catalysts, I think we're going to see continual, bid from all these different participants, and it's really something to be seen.
Now, you mentioned the Bitcoin halving, so let's focus on that. It's set to take place in a couple of months. So, what do you think the impact will be on prices and on miners? Focusing on price first, historically, these events have been positive for the price of Bitcoin. So, what do you think are the factors contributing to the positive price movement in that regard?
So the halvening has traditionally been very bullish for Bitcoin, and I think we'll continue to see that this cycle as well. Although with the longer term approach of future halvenings, with the ETF, et cetera, we should see a dampening of volatility. But at least now we're actually going into this time is different with the halvening, where you actually have tons of bid on the ETF, which in theory could be even more of a catalyst for continued price appreciation going into the halvening. I think at the beginning of this year, many folks thought that 2024 would actually be a period of more or less consolidation in Bitcoin, but it seems like it might actually be an expansion cycle and is potentially going to be leading the quote unquote bull run for crypto over this next cycle. And I think when it comes to the miners, you're seeing a little bit more potentially speculative behavior than we've seen in other cycles, where there's always been that question of, do you invest in more rigs or do you just hold spot Bitcoin, where you've got the potential to have the Bitcoin price appreciation make up for that delta. So it's been really interesting to watch, but I do think this halvening is different, and it's going to be very interesting, come April of this year, what the market does.
What else are you focused on in 2024, especially as a builder?
So in 2024, I think one of the most popular narratives that we're seeing is scaling Bitcoin. I think we've seen, as we do every halving cycle, Bitcoin comes back into vogue a little bit and becomes this Schelling point for people both inside and outside of crypto. But now the focus isn't just on Bitcoin, the base layer asset. It's all about scaling Bitcoin to try to unlock additional utility for Bitcoin holders. Bitcoin holders today have been, just limited to digital gold, which in itself is a fine use case. However, so many of these Bitcoin holders want more, whether it's non-custodial Bitcoin staking or if it's full Bitcoin DeFi, and it's solutions like Core Stacks, et cetera, that are all trying to offer these to their various constituents. And you might say, hey, why now? Well, one, we're seeing this, this outsized demand for, again, NFTs and tokens, things like that on top of Bitcoin. But also, Bitcoin now is $1 trillion asset class once again. And I think if we look into the further evolution of this cycle, it's probably several trillion. And with these Bitcoin scaling solutions, if they can capture even just a fraction of the total Bitcoin that's out there, you're talking about another trillion plus dollars coming into DeFi protocols as a whole, and some of these scaling solutions will get quite large. So I think Bitcoin is popular again with both users, builders, and the miners as well are kind of coming back into center stage once again, which drives a lot of media cycle and interest.
All right, that's all for Crypto World today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.